Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, as well as my distinguished panelists. I'm Archana Vyas. I think I've been introduced as well. I'm Director for Policy and Communication for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And today's topic, which is focused on emerging tech and how can it help accelerate the pace of social development goals, or SDGs, is extremely pertinent. I would say pertinent also because the fact that we just have about 6 years left towards the SDGs. I'm not the first one who would be speaking today. I'm sure that you've heard the fact that global disruptions, whether it was from COVID or from geopolitics, has actually stalled the pace towards the SDG goals. It is quite devastating that the pace of how we were accelerating the social development goals have been stalled, and millions of lives have been impacted. While we are going through the challenges, it's interesting how emerging tech, on the other hand, has kept pace and it has continued to make progress. We experienced the growth of innovations that led to vaccine development during COVID at an extremely fast pace because of global collaborations. But at the same time, there is emerging technology which holds promise. And my extremely esteemed panelists, who I was having a fascinating conversation in the back room, will be highlighting some of the promise of emerging tech, but also keeping in mind that emerging tech does not remain confined to high-income countries, but gets to people who need it the most. Quick introduction. Minister Uno, who is Minister of Tourism, but also Creative Economy from Indonesia. We have Hoda Al-Kaizmi, founder and director of MRSEC, Center of Emerging Tech and Advanced Research Acceleration. She's also assistant professor, Department of Engineering at NYUAD and UAE. I have Aditi Avasti, who's founder and chief executive officer of Imbibe India. Then I have Alex Rogers, who is president Qualcomm Technology Licensing and Global Affairs, and Mr. Abhishek Singh, who's additional secretary, Ministry of Electronics and IT, and he's also president and CEO of National E-Governance Division of Government of India. So first of all, I think I'm going to go to you, Hoda. Emerging technology, or AI. Can you define for me how should governments be looking at, is it really AI that we should be focusing on when they develop their national plans, and even in terms of global plans, or is it broader than AI? Because there's so much of focus. Now you go to any of the conferences, what dominates are two things. One is AI, and the other one is climate change.
This is a very interesting question and a valuable question. It's our anchor question that we should start with. I think we are living in a world today, we are bombarded with different conditioning to consider emerging technology in abstract form, which is AI. And we should be very careful of this narrative, because today, as we stand, emerging technology is more than just AI, and AI is just the top of the iceberg. And we should be looking at what's underneath that iceberg, right? It's all of this kind of stack technologies that would kind of be considered as ambiguous, lacks maturity of development, but also they're packed with potential, economic potential, human potential, societal potentials to change the current narratives and the way we are living in the next 20 years or 100 years. I think at a point of time, the internet was that kind of narratives for many, right? I don't know, in the 80s, we live in a spectrum that we're lucky to have people in the room, and I've heard this before, who lived without internet and lived with internet, right? Lived prior to the maybe innovation of internet. And now we will have people in the room as well in a few years who lived without one type of emerging technology or next. So when we are today discussing emerging technology, we're discussing the whole stack. We're discussing the potential of genomic sequencing, the potential of genomics engineering with brain cognitive interfaces, with alternative computing that could be edge computing or quantum computing or cloud computing. And we're considering AI and non-AI kind of components. And possibly what we need on the grander run is that kind of investment on national and global level of widening the horizon of consideration when we are considering emerging tech. It's not just about AI, but it's about the collective value that we are developing when we're considering the stack, when we're considering IoT, the next generation of communication that would exist beyond 5G generation and others. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Adam. You're working for Qualcomm, private sector, but still investing in technology. How do you think that your technology and the technology that you build, focusing on IoTs and even infrastructure, how can that really reach the last mile and help with sustainable development goals while your focus continues to be, as a private sector, generate profits?
So the way we think about cellular, the way we think about IoT is you have a connectivity fabric, and on top of that, you essentially have intelligence. And so we think about the world now as the connected, intelligent edge. And we still think about cellular as an emerging tech, and that's actually kind of a remarkable statement. It's counterintuitive because when you look around the world, you see how much cellular has already impacted people's lives. In India, you have 96.4% of the people that are already connected through 4G, and now you have a rollout of 5G of 420,000 base stations. And so you have this tremendous effort and ubiquitous rollout. Well over 80% of the people have some sort of cellular connectivity around the world. The smartphones that are owned around the world amount to something just under 7 billion people. So you have tremendous connectivity already. But this technology is still emerging because the use cases that need to be built on top of 4G and 5G and the use cases that need to be built on top of IoT are still being developed. And so the impact of those use cases has yet to really hit us. So there's a tremendous platform that's deployed that needs to be essentially fully optimized. Now, in terms of reaching the last mile, there are opportunities to reach the last mile. There are technical ways that you can get literally from one point in the geography to another point in the geography without having to dig trenches and lay fiber, which is really expensive. And so there's technology to do those things to kind of close the gap where the last mile is really hard to reach. But on top of that, you need to actually utilize the technology to bring value to the world. And I think India actually stands as an incredible example of that, because what India has done is they've said, look, we're going to create software. We're going to create a platform on top of this infrastructure that is useful. And so you have UPI, which is revolutionary. That's just game changing. You have health insurance that's available through this incredible platform that has been built, which is, again, game changing. And so there are opportunities to do more. One of the things that India is doing is they have a 100 5G labs project. Why are they implementing a project to have 100 5G labs built and used around India? Because they want to incentivize more innovation around use cases. Okay, and it is going to happen. But even though the cellular has been a tremendously successful platform, the use cases and the services and products that will be built on top of cellular and on top of the Internet of Things, which is basically just connected smart devices, those use cases will start to roll out over the course of the next few decades. And it will be even more impactful for more people around the world.
Thanks, Adam. Moving to Mr. Abhishek Singh, who better can to talk about how you are leveraging emerging technologies at the last mile, getting to people at the back of digital public infrastructure. Can you share some of the concrete examples in terms of how India is delivering emerging tech to people in the remotest of the locations?
Yeah, in fact, as you rightly mentioned, has been mentioned by Odo and Alex also, that India's case for using technology for improving governance, for ensuring delivery of public services to the last mile, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's agricultural services, or tackling challenges of climate change, are like diversely are known well. Like how we are able to ensure financial inclusion, how we are able to do direct benefit transfers by using technology. While DPI story is well known, when we talk of emerging tech and how we are leveraging, and emerging is also something which is emerging for a long time. I see it's already here. Emerging is emerged, and AI and all are something technologies which are already here for people to use. So the potential of AI, especially in the projects that we are implementing, is immense in the sense that, for example, we know that India is a very diverse country and people speak multiple languages. For example, 22 official languages we have, and lots of other dialects and lots of other tones in which people talk. And there are large number of people who would want to access services using the voice command. So we are implementing a project called Bhashini, wherein what we have done is used AI models to develop transliteration tools to speech, speech to text, and that allows people to access services with a voice command in their mother tongue. So just like we talk to an Alexa or a Siri, we can go to the portal and say, hey, how do I get my scholarship? Or how do I get my driving license? Or what is the price of a particular commodity in the nearest agricultural market? So, and these questions are asked with a voice command and you get the answer with voice. So it kind of connects people who are not very tech savvy, who don't have even smartphones, because people without smartphones can use a feature phone and call a toll-free number and interact with voice, because the input is voice and the output is voice. So that really empowers. And what we feel is that the last 500 million people in India, like 900 million people are already connected, they're accessing online services. But after that, there's a vast majority of almost 500 million people who need the services in Indian languages, who need the services through voice command, who without any app or a portal interface. So that potential of that people to connect to for all these online services, provide them services like a farmer can get to know how much water he should put in his crop depending on the rainfall data, depending on the crop history, and depending on what stage that crop is, and the soil health data. Sensors have become very cheap. Similarly, for students, we can use this AI technology to make personalized learning plan, like where to access services, enable easier access through a voice command, through chatbots, through voice bots. So those are the things which are immense potential in bringing a layer of emerging technology using IoT devices, using AI tools over the DPI layer that we have built up, and ensure the services become more customized, services become more relevant to people in the way they want to access them.
Thanks, Mr. Singh. I'm coming to Minister Uno. You know, two areas. One is, coming specifically to the climate change challenge, right? That is devastating when it comes to, the impact on hunger, the impact even on nourishing people. So it really impacts your SDG 1 as well as SDG 3. Now, can emerging technology really help there? And, from your experience of working in Indonesia, can you just cite certain ways in which Indonesian government is thinking about challenges of climate change, hunger, poverty, nutrition, and, the role of technology there?
Well, before being in government, I was an entrepreneur. So my DNA is still entrepreneur, even after 8 years in the government. But this morning, I was jogging at 6:30 with Ambassador Dino, and we had a good jog. And we didn't realize that the air quality was at 185. Now, last year, our president was complaining because President Jokowi complained because he was coughing because of the air quality in Jakarta. It was at around that similar level. So the emerging tech that we did following that was to enhance this sustainable tourism by allowing a company called Jejak.in, which is part of the ecosystem of Gojek, to offer a package, a tourism package that offset your carbon footprint by planting mangroves around the area of the capital or in tourist destinations. Today, I'm not sure, probably it has something to do with the wind or the weather pattern, but the quality of air quality index in Jakarta was under 50, which is unbelievable when you look at how emerging tech really impact your daily life. Ambassador Dino finished one lab, and then I continue another 2 labs. It was a nice weather. Now on nutrition, there's a company called eFishery. It's based on IoT in Indonesia and working with fishermen, improving their productivity. Through IoT, the productivity of this fisherman went up by 40%. And it produced a much better harvest, and it creates an ecosystem. So when they get better income, they're able to be able to cater for better productions, and they could be able to access financial assistance from banking and finance institutions. This has clearly showed that emerging tech not only could create jobs, but fishermen who lives below the poverty line can really benefit from emerging tech. Another example, you talk about data protections and cybersecurity, which is really needed for small, medium enterprises going into digital economy, a portfolio that I'm overseeing. A company that it's called Privy, and it provides data security, was able to reduce transactions costs by 40%. And at the same time, they create close to 400 jobs. And it started during even before COVID. So COVID really accelerated the development. Finally, I talk about the high technology, but we just finished a session at SATE, the South Asia Travel and Tourism Expositions. So another emerging tech is dealing with very simple stuff like this meeting incentive conventions and exhibitions. This company called Dus Duk Duk, basically making sure that your MICE is sustainable. The green meetings could actually be 20 to 25% cheaper. So all these sets, you could move to other places. They were 2 weeks ago, they were in Mumbai. They brought it to the same sets to Delhi today, actually, and they're gonna ship it elsewhere. So interventions like this can show that emerging tech really not only help improve our fight against poverty, but create good quality jobs, improve the air quality, and improve our daily life.
Thank you. And I'm going to move to Aditi now. Aditi, another example in terms of the work that you're doing. You're working with almost, more than 20 states in India, trying to bridge what I say in terms of, learning poverty by using technology so that especially poor children are able to get learning as they would want to receive it. Can you just talk in terms of your experience? What is it that you're learning? How is it that you're improving your technology every day, especially to bridge that digital divide? As in poor locations, not everybody has access to technology.
So I think it's very interesting because what I'm about to say probably ties together, what everybody has been talking about. So I think, first of all, before we get into emerging tech or AI, if you look at education as a problem, and that's SDG 4, which I feel is like a foundational sustainable development goal to all the other goals, because you educate to earn money, and that alleviates poverty. If you're educated, it prevents, maybe female infanticide and other things. So good education is about a teacher in front of you who can give you the right kind of attention. Bloom came up with that theory in the 1950s. It's everybody knows personal tutoring works. The second thing that matters is, does the teacher in front of you really understand content? And then can they deliver that content to you at your level? Now, the convergence of access, of compute, and connectivity that is being experienced today across the world has created a new opportunity for companies who spent the last decade or more solving the problem of personalization with relatively lower compute formulae. So maybe like running a regression model, trying to understand how learning outcomes work by capturing signal data on how students engage with content or assessments. Now that pattern analysis, that the data that you collect per student, the interventions you can make to them, those feedback loops can become more frequent. They can encompass more activities. The content that you deliver can be richer. We are actually delivering augmented reality solutions to villages, which is crazy. And the other example that I would really like to talk to you about, which I think is super critical, that we get very happy, in the government. Abhishek, we've had a lot of conversations about this, by just disseminating content and inaugurating pictures and getting photography done around something that looks really nice. The problem is, one of the metrics for Sustainable Development Goal 4 is how many kids actually get access to free primary and middle school education. The reality on the ground is, there is no exam till grade 8, and then everybody drops out at grade 9. So what's required is personalized learning outcome delivery, leveraging 100% of teacher activities, 100% of student activities, tagged back to the same data lake, and not looking at sexy technology, but doing that deep down and dirty work at a verticalized level, saying, I'm going to look at a 360-degree view of what a teacher does and a student does, and build an ecosystem of solutions that gets the most commercializable side of emerging technologies and deliver value. And I think the moment for changing the world is now, because we can really make it happen. And I think the big opportunity is a never before seen public-private partnership to deliver it, and thinking about policy at a global scale.
Oh, fantastic. And now everybody's heard the fact that, technology can help advance SDGs. But Hoda, coming back to you, how do you bridge the gap between communities and this technology, right? I mean, is it top-down, or is there any role for communities to participate as these technologies are getting developed?
I think in 2024, we need to approach the problems we're living with full scale, with a holistic approach, as Adita just has explained to us. It's a multi-layer kind of solution system where government should be involved, private sector should be involved, and civic society should be involved. And we should learn how to develop technology differently. We have been living in an era where technology is being developed as a black box in majority, and black box development is the kind of profitable, commercialized product life cycle that is being celebrated on stock markets. But we need to also adhere to the fact that if we want to change societies and make sure that SDG is being satisfied, then we need to open the room of debate amidst civic society and allow the users who are advocating for decentralized financing, for example, because they don't want centralized governments looking into their finances one way or another, or they want access to opportunities faster than what the governmental cycle is providing at the moment. We need to allow a level of disruption to exist within emerging technology. And this level of disruption, I think, that we're moving toward is about decentralized development. And when I'm saying development, I mean every scale of development that exists out there on emerging technology scale would exist in the future, in the very near future. We have heard already users saying, I don't want to exist on a platform where my data is being controlled by a third party. I want to control my data, monetize my data, and every aspect of my data that's being used to drive a profit to a lead organization out there, I should know of, and I should control the profit margin in there. And this is where the creative economy is being rising here, and opportunities that would be created for creative economies will be rising. So we are standing in a paradigm where we're pushing for a new emerging economic states that are based on a new economic models that did not exist in the past. And we have two sides of the stories, people who would tell you we should not at all evaluate technological elements that come from emerging technologies. For example, if you ask any economist on the table or financiers today about the valuations of crypto assets, they would say, oh, no, we don't want to touch that. It's so volatile. We don't want to do the valuation models that we have traditionally used on these new assets. But in reality, it's not up to us to decide. It's up to also the users, the civic societies, the public who wants these new models of finance to exist, to decide and say that we need this new market to exist. Then we need to also create all of these mechanisms and economies for those new emerging, I would say, economies and industries to exist today. So the margin or the gap that exists today in between, as you have said, communities and emerging technologies is being diminished one way or another. We have been sitting with Roblox, for example, and YouTube, and we've been seeing them changing the whole platform interaction and engagement to satisfy users. Because if they don't have users on the platform don't exist. The level of engagement is very important. The metaverse that you talked about, Edita, that you have used a new platform to deliver specific educational materials to users. Certain people saying, I don't want to exist on this metaverse because it doesn't respect my social norms. It has been developed in a specific valley in the global north, and it does not understand what social norms or cultural norms in specific region represents. So it pushes us to develop technology for niche communities, and also it pushes us to redefine what is technology development. Does it mean that I want to extract minerals from a specific continent and then develop the funding for this big tech company that exists in another country in the world for another country to be only a customer of this country, and then have export rules that would mandate that technology should be downgraded in order to be delivered to these societies? I don't think so anymore, because we are standing on the cusp of liberation of technology, where people want to develop technology by themselves. I want to do 3D manufacturing of a specific technology. In COVID, it happened in the UK, right? Where mothers in their homes, they bought these 3D printers and they started developing their niche designs of a new mask that they pushed to markets, right? And they didn't wait for a specific company to do it. What would happen if we also fast accelerated that and we applied to drug delivery? If we wanted specific communities to have their own say of how they would develop drugs and do other aspects as well. It also pushes us. We have discussed this with Alex in the break room, to think of chip manufacturing into a different paradigm. Maybe I want to have these small fabrication houses existing closer to the source, closer to the mining industries that exist globally. So I can change the economies of communities within Africa, within this mining industry, so they can develop their own solutions, their own communication solutions that make sense to them, rather than just wait for maybe someone to allow a Starlink to access African market. So all of this, a new paradigm of co-development of technology, we're seeing it being unraveled at the moment, and we will see much more scientific hubs, R&D hubs being localized within these new economies and new emerging technologies, new emerging markets on the longer run.
I'm going to go to Mr. Abhishek Singh and Minister Uno. How are you keeping pace of emerging tech and policy making? Just the way that Huda described it, right? Communities actually ultimately having a say in terms of it's not going to be top down, and it has to be co-created.
I feel like she raised a lot of issues, and those are the issues we all are grappling with. When we look at emerging tech or basic tech and try to use it for governance, ultimately, what is the benchmark that we are looking at? Like, in what ways citizens or users, businesses benefit from the services that the government is offering? How do we make government, how do we demystify government? How do we bring in transparency? How do we ensure that accountability sets in? And how do we reach the last mile? How do we ensure that everybody is covered? So digital inclusion, digital access, transparency, all of these become key principles. And when we're doing that, technology by itself is a great enabler. It does a lot of these things by itself. When we bring in the layer of AI over it, it does further add to that. And when we look at governing technology, what kind of technology is come, very often with the context of emerging tech and especially AI, this whole issue of ethical and responsible AI comes in. How do we ensure that while we harness the benefits of technology, how do we have guardrails that prevents any misuse or any kind of user harm? So the way we look in India is that instead of being very restrictive, we have tried to define what means user harm and what is it that's causing benefits. And when we look at user harm, there are established legal provisions which define what may be like child sexual abuse or pornography or other kind of elements which can be harmful to society in general. And then we add to that, especially in the present context of democratic nations, misinformation and deep fakes that can also be a product of AI, which can really disrupt social systems and impact democracies. So we need regulations to prevent misuse of such technologies, but at the same time, we also need policies to ensure that we promote innovation, which helps in improving governance per se. And when that is done, the objectives of what the community wants, whether it's bottoms up or what the top policy makers want, they converge. And that's where we need to kind of bring some consensus if we have to move forward in this direction.
I know Huda wants to come in, and then Minister. Yeah.
I just wanted to add a point here that we are standing on the problems of yesterdays. And because we did not address technology governance in the past, this kind of a dragon is coming to bite us again, because for a very long time, we don't have a global technology governance structure or a technology regulation framework that is being governed on a global level. And today, if we don't have one single global stance towards that respects, of course, the heterogeneity of a globe of different nations, and integrate that kind of heterogeneity into the solution model, we'll keep seeing these problems. Deepfakes existed in the past, but now because of AI, widespread, they're existing in 80%. Misinformation existed in the past, but because of the current global use and widespread of social media, it's very transparent for you as a user to detect misinformation and disinformation, which is good, because as a user, you cannot be fooled easily as it was in the past. However, we need to make sure that people who are putting technology into your table have a responsibility towards what they are developing. And I think it's too easy for them to develop a tool that would tell you if certain piece of information that's being delivered is actually authentic or non-authentic or have a level of integrity. It's not that difficult.
So I had a point to make to your earlier point. You know, it's getting to be a very passionate panel. Yeah. I think that it's also very important to address the point about equity. Okay, and how emerging technologies actually reach the masses. And it's interesting because given the cost of computers going down, you were talking about NVIDIA earlier on, in our discussion, they're saying that they're going to produce processors where 7 out of 8 pixels can now be generated as deepfake. So the point is, the private sector's impetus is to increase equity by reducing the cost of delivery, by democratizing and access. And I think the government actually has to be ahead of its game, collaborate deeper, because if the world is producing deepfakes, the government has to catch them. And that's the only thing that's going to keep society sane, right? And also, I think that, it's easy to talk about a co-creation economy, but then once again, if you go back to how Google image search was made, some lady said, I'm going to sit and tag 13 million images, and then it's going to really become a commercial or a consumer use case. That's not going to happen without systematic effort. So I just want to refocus us towards SDGs. It will not happen to somebody takes an iPad or an Android rugged book, goes to the last mile, be it in healthcare, be it in education, be it in whatever, and makes it work with the end user, makes it affordable, and then takes a step back and says, what is homogeneous and what has to be configured for race acceptance, social emotional acceptance? Because if everybody starts to build for their own consumption, we're never going to be able to afford and leverage the benefit of the equity that this technology explosion gives us at scale. And I think we look to our governments to keep us sane. And we look to our device companies, and the compute companies to provide the guardrails on device now so that, the common person doesn't have to sit and innovate for it. There's a company, just a final point, Lightspeed Systems in the UK, ensures that children don't consume any kind of content which is harmful to them, because there are so many other thoughts besides just pornography, like, for example, mental health, right? But Nobody here has access to light-speed systems because it's unaffordable. So now what do? Do we build our own light-speed systems? How many countries are going to do that? So I think that's just the point I wanted to bring in from an equity and a guardrail standpoint.
Give last word to Minister Uno before I open it up to the audiences. Otherwise, it
This-
is such a fascinating
this
discussion.
is,
We can just
this
go
is
on.
great,
Yeah.
and we should thank the dialogue, Raisina Dialogue, for having such great conversations. And I think government should listen. And I think in particular, I think this is the sessions whereby I listen more than I talk. And in my ministry, I have even better than AI, which is more women leaders.
Fantastic.
My deputies are 50% or more women, and they know even what I'm going to be saying
Yeah,
next.
that's fantastic.
They don't need AI. They said they already can predict what I would take a position on. And you talk about SDGs. I think we take such a simple affirmative, and they are good. These women leaders, when they're on the job, because the other side then creative economy is tourism, and we believe based on evidence, evidence-based and data-driven, that who decide to go to vacations? Is it the husband or the wives? So it's the wives. So we need women leaders to tell us what type of policies that we need to make. On the creative economy front, when you buy creative economy products, who decide? More or so, the women would decide. And that's why evidence-based, data-driven, this is what the government should do. We should listen more, and technology will help us because we have big data and overlay it. We have the AI and policies. The Indonesian government, in terms of creative economy, have now put a priority because we have now 8% of our economy contributed by creative economy, and this is the third largest in the world. So we need to use more data, listen more, and bring more women leaders.
Thank you so much. With this, I'm going to open up to the audiences. Please raise your hand and say your name and ask your question. And please make your question short because we just have about 7 minutes left.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vanessa Hiernes, and I'm a behavioral scientist at King's College London. In looking at towards 2030 and beyond, we often have heard that business as usual won't cut it. Yet many of our most innovative solutions are to be embedded in already existing and established systems. So my question would be, does everyone on the panel agree that the notion of continuous growth and the notion that technology is going to save us, is that business as usual, or do we need more radical systems change approaches? And if so, what would those be?
Okay, go ahead. I'm just going to ask one of the panelists to answer that question because looking at the queue there.
Yeah, okay. So I just have a response. So it's a great question, right? Because status quo is not going to cut it. And I have a very simple one-point answer to that. If you just look at India, if you just look at education, because I understand that space well, I'm going to limit that as an example. It's a very important SDG. 60% of kids are enrolled in public sector, in public schools. If you want to improve quality of education, that means that procurement systems have to work in such a way that they're able to assimilate more and more of tech innovation to bridge that last mile gap where there's shortage of teacher supply. But what's happening is procurement rules and policies are sitting still, and that collaboration of private and public, accelerated impact on the industry is missing. And I think this is a big opportunity because it's just going to take a few people getting into the room and realizing we need outside help. And through that partnership, I feel like 2030 is not out of sight, at least for India.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed. I'm from Egypt. So the panel was about the opportunities provided by the emerging technologies, but equally important is regulating the emerging technologies. So how can developing countries participate to regulating the emerging technologies without, of course, stifling innovation? Thank you.
Who wants to take it? Abhishek and then
Kind
Hoda?
of, I had addressed this partly in the earlier response, but what developing countries need to know is, they need to understand is that this whole emerging technology space, the AI space especially, and if you look at the enablers of AI, the compute and the algorithms, they are presently confined to a few companies and a few countries. The developing countries need to, especially the countries, the global south, need to work with the established institutions to enable more equitable access. And when we do that, when we develop the regulations, the guardrails, how do you regulate to ensure that the foundation models which are being trained are also trained on data which is more representative. If the foundation models are trained on only one set of countries' data, then it will not work everywhere. So that is where we need to work together. We have been taking the steps as part of the G20 initiative to bring it a coalition, to bring it an alliance of the global south to ensure that we get represented, we get a seat at the high table of AI, and ensure the regulatory frameworks capture the requirements that we have as a community, as a group of countries.
I would add sandbox approach, just 2 words. That's what my wife and I did also with our little son. It helps with developing countries.
Alex, you wanted
really
to add?
quickly,
Yeah.
I think there's kind of unusual recognition on the part of the private sector that AI needs to be regulated. But I also think that, coming from the United States, that there needs to be more recognition, at least in the US government, I think, that global regulation and participation in global effort to regulate needs to really be worked at. That can't, we can't slack on that.
I just want to add something. I
Yeah.
think it's a good idea for us to take multiple questions.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. I was going to move to that side and take both the questions together.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Vani. I am a project manager with a market research firm. So my question is, how do you think like emerging tech or AI will help us promote peaceful and inclusive society, which is one of the sustainable development goals for us? Thank you.
Hi, a very good evening to the panelists. My name is Vedansh. Very interesting discussions indeed. My question relates to tech for SDGs. So while I think all of us acknowledge that technology is important for SDGs, what should be the ideal game plan for ensuring the accessibility of these technologies to maybe lower and middle income countries? In context of it, how do we navigate intellectual property laws that might hinder affordability to maybe the lowest income strata? Thank you.
We
Should
can
we
take
take
more
one
questions.
question? Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, myself, Mudit Vashish from St. Stephen's Center of Advanced Learning. My question is from Sir Alex Rogers and Sir Abhishek. So as we saw that critical and emerging technologies like AI and IoT portals have been very effective in delivery of public services here in India. And it is very vital to ensure the fulfillment of SDGs by 2030. But we also require onboarding of Global South, specifically Africa, to ensure that SDGs are achieved by 2030. But what is the role of multinational corporations like Qualcomm and leaders of emerging technologies like Ministry of IT in India to ensure that there is equity in access to critical and emerging technologies? Thank you.
I'm going to wait, but there were questions around emerging tech for SDGs, role of MNCs and role of IP. Who wants to take that? The first one, and
I can take IP.
IP, okay. SDGs, emerging.
So in terms of SDG, emerging technology for peace, I think we need to understand that emerging tech and SDGs don't come like in silos. They come with codependencies, or you can't just solve for one SDG and isolate the solution for the rest. You have the infrastructure, SDG, infrastructure and development of a new types of work and economic growth opportunities are going hand in hand together. So in terms of addressing how can we use emerging tech for peace and peace negotiations, we're seeing the current dialogue and format. We're trying to build proper kind of reliable, secure emerging technology solutions that are ethical, as well as having a deeper values to society, and that can give voice to society as well to say if there is a level of instability within it. That's very important for all of us to see across the map here.
Alex, quickly, role of MNCs or private sector, and then moving to Aditi in terms of role of IP.
Yeah, just really quickly. So what Qualcomm has done for decades now is actually build more performance into semiconductors at essentially lower power. And so the cost continues to cascade down. So we've made incredible progress over the decades. What needs to happen in Africa is we need to be able to essentially afford CapEx to roll out infrastructure, to take advantage of there from 2G to 3G to 4G and then on to 5G. It's just an expensive process. And there has to be, I think, government incentives in order to be able to do that because it's difficult for operators to essentially recover their costs. One of the things that we've been working on, even though infrastructure is really not our specialty, is developing technology to allow infrastructure to reach the last mile without having to dig trenches, something called fixed wireless access, to drastically reduce the cost of getting to population centers without having to deal with difficult terrain. So other innovations have to happen, but it's very difficult to essentially for operators to afford to roll out the CapEx. And I think, depending on which market you're in, government assistance has to happen in order to enable that.
So I think from an intellectual property standpoint, for example, ChatGPT is expensive, so you can't use it for education. That's one view on IP. And the other view on IP is how generous do you really want to be with your IP at the risk of potentially monetizing a lot more because you want to solve a problem for the world, right? So I can give a specific example. If you have your own domain data and you build your own IP to solve certain problems, which you then don't have to use expensive services from the cloud, but it achieves the purpose, or you use more on-device compute, which is, for example, intrinsic to the device itself. So a great example is OCR. Google OCR is expensive. It's effective, but it's expensive. On-device OCR is free because it's on-device. So if you want to build an app that recognizes keywords, for example, from text, if you use on-device OCR and make it really effective, it solves a problem, the price can be much lower, it becomes a lot more affordable. So I think that's the opportunity, building more of indigenous IP that can be monetized. And the second opportunity, I think, is going back to my earlier point about working with the government to solve problems, is how open you can be with your IP to create custom deployments that actually solve problems in the context of government guardrails and really reaching the last mile and making the access to the whole thing equitable. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the world today are trying to use the paradigm of emerging technologies to actually drive up prices for things that should become cheaper, defeating the purpose of achieving an SDG.
I'm sure Abhishek has more to add to that.
Just to add that IP is something that's not unique to emerging tech or AI. IP is required in almost every technology sectors, whether it's healthcare or agriculture, anywhere. So IP we need to factor in. Without IP, if you restrict all IP, then there will be no innovation. So IP will be there, but in tech and in AI, the advantage is that we also have an open source movement. There is an open source solutions, there are developers and all who contribute to the open source. So as long as there is open source and proprietary lines are going on, it will ensure that we will drive innovation, as also ensure that countries in the global south, countries in the developing countries, countries in Africa also get a chance to innovate and build on the solutions which are already available.
When it deals with the needs for greater goods for a lot of people, I think we should democratize IP. We need the government to step in, and that's what the Indonesian government did with the presidential decree. A couple of times IP becomes inaccessible. That's where the government role is. We need to make sure that it's available to the people.
Very well said.
And we've seen new startups that works on IP. I don't know if you know Story Protocol, a startup that raised over $45 million because they want to change the way we perceive IPs and make it accessible to the public. So we'll see more with emerging tech.
I'm sorry, we won't be able to take more questions because we've been told that time's up, but you'll have time to engage with the panelists and ask your questions. Thank you so much.